everyone, so today's video is going to be about Boon Totems. Boon Totems are a new form of survivor perk that just recently released on the Dead by Daylight PTB yesterday. In this video, I want to cover some of the basic information surrounding Boon Totems, address some of the feedback players have given, and hopefully clarify some of the aspects surrounding these new perks. Therefore, let's start at the statements the devs have released previously about these Boon Totems. Within the game manual, it discusses totems, hexes, and boons under one category. It states that there are 5 randomly positioned dull totems in each trial. Survivors can cleanse these totems for extra blood points. Killer perks called hex perks will transform a dull totem into a hex totem, which can be identified by its orange flames. Survivors can cleanse a hex totem to deactivate the associated hex perk and dispel its curse. Survivor perks called boon perks will transform a dull totem into a boon totem when blessed by a survivor. Killers can snuff out boon totems to deactivate the associated boon perk and dispel its blessing. So, while looking at this, I want to point out that while hex perks and boon perks are within the same category, it appears that the devs are trying to propose that they both have different forms of gameplay. So let's dive into what boon totems do in more specific details. So here we have a message written by the developers that explains Boon Totems in more detail. As promised in the anniversary live broadcast, we are introducing some new gameplay around totems. These will add an extra objective around the map, much like killer hex totems are tied to survivor perks. Survivors will be able to bless a totem to change it into a boon totem, and these blessings are designed to offer comfort to the survivor team, a small safe haven. However, unlike a hex totem, the killer can also quickly interact with the created boon totem to completely remove the associated blessing, once again turning it into a dull totem. They will also be able to hear the boon totem when it's in range. Here's one of the key points mentioned within the post. Each survivor can only have one boon totem active at a time. This boon totem will combine the effects of all of their equipped boon perks. Therefore, if you have 2 boon perks that provide specific effects, they will both be transferred to one totem. This is a point where I think it's very important to talk about the main differences between hex perks and boon perks. So, as stated previously, multiple boon perks can only be applied to one totem. If that totem is snuffed out, then both of those perks will become dormant. And I say dormant because a survivor can walk up to another dull totem and reactivate the boon. These aspects differ from hex perks because hex perks are designed to one totem per perk. Therefore, if a survivor cleanses a totem, let's say Devour Hope, but doesn't cleanse another totem, let's say Noed, then survivors still have to find the other totem and cleanse it. Another aspect that's interesting is that boon perks have an audio cue when the killer is nearby, similar to whispers, but instead of hearing the ugh noises, it's replaced with chimes. So if we look at one of the new survivors perks, we can see the description that says soft chimes will ring out in a 28-meter range, and it appears that this range will change with each tier as it levels up. So hex perks do not emit an auditory sound, and therefore it requires survivors to have perks such as small game or detective's hunch, or even a rainbow map, in order to find hex perks. However, this situation is limited because a majority of the time, survivors run the same perks in solo queue, such as DS, Dead Hard, and Self-Care, with the exception of course being Survive with Friends. Hex perks and boon perks also differ due to the fact that boon perks can be reapplied multiple times while hex perks cannot. This is where a good degree of players say these boon perks are ridiculously strong or OP. But let's discuss many of the points that have been brought up so far in the past few hours by killer mains and survivor mains alike. So the first point is that boon perks are ridiculously strong in a Survive with Friends group. Unfortunately, if we look at the statements, it's very situational. Unless we have the data on how much of the player base plays as a Survive with Friends group or solo queue, there is no guarantee that everyone playing Dead by Daylight is going to be a Survive with Friends group. From my personal experience, I play very often in solo queue, and it can be very difficult to coordinate with other players in order to complete the gens and escape. With that being said, looking at these boon perks, it's not actually good if multiple people in a Survive with Friends have multiple of the same boon perks. If you're in a well-coordinated group, the chances are is that each player has a certain role or playstyle that they're fulfilling. So you'll have one person who engages the killer in a chase to distract them. You'll have another person who's focused on getting the unhooks and healing those players. And your two other people will either be focused on doing gens and totems or helping down survivors. So running perks that allow them to wiggle faster out of a killer's grip. These roles can also overlap within each other as players trade, quote unquote trade, the killer between one another. So with that being said, it would not be ideal to run multiple versions of these boon perks when you're in a Discord call and can simply tell your teammate, hey, I put a boon perk down by Shack, or I put a boon perk down by the main building, so that your friends can simply go to that area and just take advantage of the boon properties that you brought, while they can still rotate between other perks, such as Dead Hard, Life, Spine Chill, whatever they're using for their build. The second point that has also been said is that boon perks should not be used infinitely like hexes. With this statement, I partially agree on this point, that boon perks should not be used indefinitely, but I think it's very wrong to compare boon perks to hex perks. The purpose of boon perks, similar to that of hex perks, is that it's supposed to be a secondary objective. So there's only one totem for every boon perk that a character has, where the killer has multiple hex totems for each perk. That is only one of the different aspects that is between hex totems and boon totems. Additionally, hex totems do not make a sound at all, and survivors often have to trade perks in order for a more totem-focused build, which very rarely occurs. I think that you should be able to use boon perks multiple times, but it should come with either a cooldown or use tokens similar to a perk like Distortion, instead of the one and done method that is used on hex totems. This is simply because that they're not equal in the properties that they have. So if they're going to continue to have different aspects, then you should be able to balance them differently, or else make them both the same, so that these boon totems do not make a sound just like hex perks. Another big difference too is that the killers have an immense amount of pressure that they can place on a totem by injuring survivors. Even though survivors can place the blessing, they have no other way to combat against the killer stomping it out, or in the situation that the killer can potentially trap the hex perk and use that to their advantage, especially if they have the ability to down players easily. So with that being said on just the general information about boon perks, let's talk about what interactions they have so far. So the interactions between boon totems and hex totems are pretty straightforward. A survivor has to take the time, which they could be using to do a gen, to bless a totem. If most of the totems are cleansed and there is only one totem left that is blessed, Noed will not replace the blessed totem. Additionally, a survivor can cleanse and bless a totem at the same time. So now let's move on to look at the specific boon perks that come out with this new survivor, Michaela Reed. So the first boon perk is going to be Boon Circle of Healing. Press and hold the ability button near a dull or hex totem to bless it and create a boon totem. Soft chimes ring out in a 28-meter range. Any survivors within the boon totem's range gain a 90% healing speed bonus and can heal themselves without needing a medkit. You can only bless one totem at a time. All equipped boon perks are active on your boon totem. And an important thing to note is that this does stack with medkits. I know people have posted videos, but they haven't clarified when they're using medkits or if they're simply using self-care or if they have nothing at all and are healing with it. So this is going to have varying degrees of healing speeds based on what kind of items you brought with you into the game. The next boon perk is Boon Shadowstep. press and hold the ability button near a doll or hex totem to bless it and create a boon totem. Soft chimes ring out in a 28-meter range. Any survivors within the boon totem's range will have their scratch marks and auras hidden to the killer. This effect lingers for 2 seconds after leaving the boon totem's range. You can only bless one boon totem at a time. All equipped boon perks are active on your boon totem. So, in conclusion, clearly the devs are trying to institute a new form of gameplay for the killers to prioritize other than gens. This makes it so that killers are less likely to camp gens or camp people on hooks when they have to go out and actively find a blessed totem in order to prevent their survivors from getting that added bonus. However, players should acknowledge that there are many aspects that are different between hex perks and boon perks. So in order to balance them properly, hex perks and boon perks should either have the same property, such as not emitting a noise, or having all perks being placed on one totem, or the devs should clarify further that boon totems are a completely separate form of gameplay from hex perks, as they have tried to indirectly state so far. This will cause people not to compare the two of them. So I hope this clarifies a couple of things, and I'll see you guys out there in the fog.